The man shouldn't have survived the night. That was Clara Nash's first thought when she saw him slumped against her barn wall, his chest barely rising beneath the torn leather vest. Blood had dried to a black crust across his ribs, and his right hand was clenched around something small, with such force his knuckles looked carved from bone. She'd seen men die before. The frontier didn't forgive weakness, and mercy was a luxury her father had taught her to bury years ago. But this wasn't just a wounded stranger. There was a purpose in how he'd come here, a direction in his collapse, as if her land was where he meant to fall. The dawn light cut across the dry fields, catching the edge of his cheekbone. His skin carried the bronze hue of the desert tribes, an Apache, no doubt, and that alone could get her hanged if the wrong eyes saw him alive. Her father's voice whispered through the back of her mind. The line between justice and survival is thinner than a knife's edge. Clara should have ridden into town, should have told Sheriff Vance and let the law deal with him. But when she reached for her rifle, the man's fingers twitched, and for the briefest moment, she thought she saw her father's medallion glinting in his blood-stained hand. Something impossible. Something that froze her where she stood. 3 days earlier, Clara Nash had buried her last horse under the lone cottonwood behind the barn. The sickness had taken the rest 5 fine animals in a single week, leaving her ranch silent as a graveyard. The neighbors whispered it was punishment for her father's sins, that Elias Nash had made too many enemies before he died with a bullet in his back, and a story no one dared question. The land had turned against her since. The crops failed, the wind carried dust instead of rain, and every night the coyotes howled like they were mocking her stubbornness for staying. But Clara stayed anyway. This was her father's soil. The same ground where he taught her how to shoot, how to ride, how to stand her ground when decency cost more than safety. Now, as the morning sun broke over the ridge, she stood in the same yard where her family dream had collapsed, staring at the half-dead Apache lying in its shadow. His dark hair was caked with dust and blood. The pattern of his vest marked him from the southern bands, far from home, far from safety. Whoever shot him had done so, close range, execution style. Her heart pounded in her chest. Lawmen didn't shoot that way. Clara's fingers brushed the medallion still visible between his curled fingers, its silver edge engraved with 3 faint letters, E.N., her father's initials, the same medallion that had vanished the night they buried him. The smart thing would have been to ride into town and tell Sheriff Vance she'd found a dying Apache near her barn. Let him handle it. Let the law decide whether he lived or died. But Clara had learned long ago that the smart thing and the right thing rarely walked the same road. Her father died proving it. She knelt beside the stranger, the cold dirt damp beneath her knees. His breathing was shallow, yet steady enough to mock death itself. Up close, she could see the object in his hand. Wasn't just her father's medallion, it was snapped from a chain, the break fresh, like it had been torn off in a struggle. Her pulse quickened. She reached out, gently prying his fingers open. The man's eyes shot open like a rattlesnake striking. They were black as wet coal, and for a heartbeat, Clara forgot how to breathe. His hand caught her wrist, not rough, but desperate. His lips moved, forming a single word in a language she didn't know. The sound was sharp, rhythmic, carrying a weight that chilled her more than any threat could. Then he said it again, slower this time, as if begging her to understand. His grip loosened, his hand fell limp. Unconscious or dead, Clara didn't know which. She looked at the medallion, the silver now streaked with his blood. How could an Apache warrior shot, hunted, dying be holding something that had been buried with Elias Nash 5 years ago? Before she could think, the wind shifted. Hoofbeats. Multiple riders, fast and close. They were coming. And whoever they weren't coming to save him. Clara didn't think she moved. Her body acted on pure instinct, the kind her father had drilled into her long before she ever fired a gun in anger. She gripped the Apache under his arms, the muscles in her back screaming as she dragged him across the dirt floor. He was heavier than he looked, his boots cutting grooves through the earth. The hoofbeats outside were getting louder, thundering down the road like a warning she couldn't ignore. "Damn you, whoever you are," she hissed through gritted teeth. There was only one place to hide him. Her father had built a trapdoor beneath the feed storage after the war, a place for storing grain during raids. Though she suspected it had been used for other things too. She yanked it open, the hinges crying out like a dying animal, and rolled the man into the dark below. The dull thud of his body landing made her stomach twist. She threw hay bales over the door just as 3 riders burst through the yard. Dust rose behind them, glowing gold in the morning light. These weren't lawmen. Lawmen didn't wear red bandanas over their faces or ride with rifles already drawn. The lead rider dismounted without waiting for invitation, his boots thudding heavy against the porch steps. A single knock echoed through the quiet before he pushed open her door. "Morning, Miss Nash." His voice was too polite, the kind that hid something mean beneath. "We're looking for a man. Apache breed, wounded bad. You seen anything out of the ordinary?" Clara wiped her hands on her apron, keeping her tone even. "Out here, everything's out of the ordinary. You'll need to be clearer than that." The man's pale eyes, cold, hard. The color of dirty ice swept over her face. "Don't play dumb. Blood on your barn wall. Fresh tracks. We ain't got all day." Then, her hand drifted toward the kitchen knife lying near the sink. "Coyotes," she said flatly. "One got into my hen house last week. I cleaned it up this morning." The leader took a slow step closer, invading her space. "Your daddy was a good man," he said softly. "Shame what happened to him." "Terrible accident," they said. The word accident sliced through her like a blade. He smiled then, and it wasn't kind. "You look just like him when you lie." Clara's jaw clenched. "Get off my land." "And we will," he said, glancing at his men. "After we search your barn. You got a warrant?" "Don't need one for an Apache. Especially not one who killed 2 of my men last night." Her heart thudded in her ears. 2 men? The Apache had fought back. But that meant these weren't bounty hunters, they were something worse. The man pushed past her, his boots leaving mud prints across her floor. Clara followed as they spread out through the barn, overturning crates, kicking through hay bales. The leader moved slow, deliberate, his gaze sharp as a hawk's. He wasn't guessing he was hunting. He stopped inches from the trapdoor. Her pulse pounded so loud she thought he'd hear it. "You married, Miss Nash?" he asked, crouching down. "What?" "Pretty woman like you, living out here alone. Dangerous thing. Lots of accidents happen to women on their own." He brushed the edge of a hay bale with his fingers. One more second and he'd see the latch. "I saw someone," Clara said quickly. "East Ridge. Just before sunrise. Might have been who you're after." He froze, looked up at her. "That so?" Couldn't see his face. He was moving fast. The man straightened slowly, his pale eyes never leaving hers. He didn't believe her, but he couldn't prove otherwise. "You're a terrible liar," he muttered, stepping back. "Always have been." Her breath caught. Those were the exact words Sheriff Morgan Vance had said to her once years ago when she'd tried to hide tears after her father's funeral. The man turned to his riders. "Mount up. We'll check east." They left, but not before he gave her one last look, one that promised he'd be back. Clara waited until the dust settled before rushing to the trapdoor. She threw aside the hay and pulled it open. The Apache was still there, unconscious, but breathing. His skin was pale beneath the dust, his pulse fluttering weakly in his throat. "Who the hell are you?" she whispered. He didn't answer, but when her fingers brushed his hand, his eyes fluttered open again. This time, there was no confusion in them, only recognition. He looked at the medallion still hanging from her fingers and whispered one word through cracked lips. "Elias." Her father's name. The air left her lungs. "You knew him?" His head tilted slightly. "He saved my sister," he said in broken English, each word rasping like dry wind. "Men came hunting. He stopped them. They shot him for it." Clara froze. The story the sheriff had told an accident during a hunting trip flashed through her mind. All of it felt like dust now, blowing away under this man's dying breath. "Who shot him?" she whispered. The Apache's eyes flicked toward the door. "The one who came today. The leader." Her stomach turned. "Vance?" He nodded once. Her father's best friend. The man who'd sworn to protect her. The man who'd buried Elias Nash with a lie. The ground seemed to shift beneath her. The walls of the barn closed in, the air thick with the smell of blood and hay. Everything she'd believed for 5 years cracked open in that moment. Why do you have his medallion?" she asked. "He gave it to my sister before he died," the man said weakly. "Told her, bring it to his daughter. Promise kept." He coughed, the sound wet and painful. My sister died 3 moons ago. I finished her task. Clara's throat tightened. He'd crossed miles of hostile land, bleeding, hunted, carrying the one thing that could tear her world apart, and he'd done it because of a promise. She pressed a rag against his wound. What's your name? Talon, Greyhawk. Well, Talon, she murmured. You picked one hell of a place to fall. That night, a storm rolled in from the north. Rain battered the roof. Lightning flashed across the plains. Clara sat by the stove, the rifle across her knees, listening to the thunder and to Talon's shallow breathing. He was burning with fever, muttering in his sleep, sometimes in Apache, sometimes in English. When he spoke her father's name again, her chest ached. She thought about Sheriff Vance, about the lie he'd built over her life, about the way he'd looked at her today, not like a friend, but like a man assessing what she knew. The truth was dangerous now, and the only man who could confirm it was bleeding out in her house. Near midnight, a sharp knock rattled the door. Clara froze. Clara. A familiar voice called through the rain. Deep, calm, commanding. It's Morgan. Open up. We need to talk. She didn't move. The storm outside howled like it knew what waited on the other side of that door. Those men who came by earlier, Vance continued, his tone soft, fatherly. They're dangerous. If you're hiding someone, I can help. Help. That word twisted in her gut. Talon stirred beside the stove. His eyes snapped open, fear flickering in their depths. He recognized the voice. His hand crept toward the knife she'd left on the table. Clara, Vance said again, this time sharper. I'm coming in. She swallowed hard, grabbed the rifle, and unbarred the door. Rain poured through the opening, washing mud across her floor. Sheriff Morgan Vance stood on her porch, coat slick with water, badge gleaming in the lantern light. His eyes softened when he saw her. Thank God, he breathed. You had me worried. What? She cut him off. That you'd have to kill me too? His expression froze, the mask slipping just long enough for her to see the truth behind it. Who's been talking to you? He asked quietly. Someone who was there. Vance's hand drifted toward his holster. You don't understand, Clara. I understand enough. Before he could draw, a crash came from behind her. Talon, half conscious, half wild, had tried to stand, the table tipping over with a loud clatter. Vance's eyes darted past her shoulder. Step aside, he ordered. She didn't move. No, you're harboring a murderer. So are you. For a moment, neither spoke. Rain hammered the roof. Thunder cracked overhead. Then, like a fuse catching, everything exploded. Vance reached for his gun. Clara slammed the rifle barrel against his wrist, sending the shot wide. The bullet tore through the wall beside her head. She kicked the door shut behind him, trapping them both inside. Talon grabbed the fallen pistol and fired once. The shot grazed Vance's arm, spinning him backward. Clara seized the moment, shoving the sheriff toward the table. He hit it hard, knocking over the lantern. Fire bloomed instantly, licking across the spilled whiskey on the floor. Go, she shouted to Talon. He hesitated, limping toward the back door. Clara fired a warning shot into the ceiling as Vance lunged for her. The smoke burned her throat. Outside, horses screamed. The men were back. She didn't wait to see what happened next. She grabbed Talon, threw his arm over her shoulder, and pushed through the back door into the storm. Rain doused the flames on her coat as they stumbled toward the corral. Gunfire erupted behind them. She shoved Talon onto the only horse left alive and swung up behind him. Hold on, she gasped, kicking the mare hard. Lightning split the sky as they rode into the black, the sound of pursuit echoing through the thunder. Behind them, her home, the last piece of her father's life, burned bright against the storm. And ahead of them, the canyon waited, the same place where Clara Nash had been killed 5 years ago. The truth was coming full circle. The rain turned the plains into rivers of mud. Clara's horse fought for footing, hooves slipping on the soaked ground as thunder rolled over the open land. Talon sagged against her chest, his blood soaking through her shirt, hot and slick even in the freezing rain. Stay with me, she whispered through the storm. You didn't come this far to die now. He stirred faintly, his lips moving. Canyon. Your father. Cave. What cave? She shouted over the wind. He tried again, weaker this time. Something hidden. Meant for you. Before she could press him, the horse stumbled. Clara barely held on as the ground dropped away. They'd reached the edge of the canyon, jagged, black, and endless beneath the flashes of lightning. Behind them came the sound of pursuit, 6 riders or more, their torches burning like angry eyes in the rain. Sheriff Vance's men, trapped, no way forward but down. Clara turned the horse sharply, searching for any way out. Talon's hand found hers, his grip weak, but deliberate. "Trust," he whispered. Then he shoved her. The world vanished in a blur of wind and water as they plunged off the cliff. The fall seemed eternal. Then came the impact. They hit the river hard. The icy water ripped the breath from her lungs, spinning her like a rag doll. She fought the current, her arm locked around Talon's body, her boots dragging along rocks beneath the surface. When she finally broke through, gasping, she could barely hear anything but the roar of the river. Talon's body was limp in her grasp, but there was still a faint pulse. "Don't you die on me," she hissed, dragging him toward the shore. They crawled onto a narrow bank, coughing up water and blood. Above them, torches flickered along the rim. The men shouted, their voices faint over the storm. "They think we're dead," Clara said, her voice trembling. "Let's keep it that way." Talon's eyes fluttered open. He pointed weakly toward the waterfall a short distance upstream. Behind. There. She squinted through the rain. The waterfall looked solid, unbroken. But she trusted him. Helping him to his feet, she half-carried him along the rocky bank until they reached the falls. The sheet of water crashed over them, numbing her arms as she pushed through. Behind it lay a narrow opening, a hidden cave. Inside was darkness and silence. The only sound the drip of water echoing against the stone. Clara set Talon down carefully, her hands trembling as she struck a match. The faint light revealed a small shelf carved into the rock. Resting on it was a tin box wrapped in oilcloth. Her breath caught as she unwrapped it. Inside lay papers, dozens of them, each one covered in her father's handwriting. Names, dates, payment ledgers, bounties. The words blurred through her tears. Elias Nash hadn't died in a hunting accident. He'd uncovered an illegal bounty ring Sheriff Vance's operation. Wealthy ranchers paid Vance and his men to clear Apache families from disputed land. And when Elias found out, they'd killed him for it. At the bottom of the box was a folded letter addressed to Clara. She didn't open it. She couldn't. Not yet. Talon's voice broke the silence. "He kept proof," he rasped. "So truth could live." Clara's heart ached at the sight of him, barely conscious, skin ghost pale, blood seeping from reopened stitches. "You need a doctor." He shook his head. "No time. They'll come." She pressed her hands against his wound, trying to slow the bleeding. "Then we make this count." The match flickered out. In the darkness, she could feel his breath slowing, each one shallower than the last. "Why bring this to me?" she whispered. "You could have left it. Saved yourself." Talon's voice was a faint echo. "Your father saved my sister. I repay." He managed a weak smile. "Promise kept." Clara swallowed the lump in her throat. "Then I'll keep his promise too." Outside, a new sound rose over the rain, the whinny of horses. The men had come down into the canyon. "Can you shoot?" she asked. Talon nodded faintly. "Then we fight." She positioned herself near the entrance, rifle ready. Each second stretched like an eternity. Then a voice rang out through the storm. "Clara." Her blood froze. Sheriff Morgan Vance stood on the far side of the waterfall, torch in one hand, pistol in the other. His coat was torn, a streak of blood running down his shoulder. "It's over," he called. "Come out. Let's talk." "Talk," she shouted back. "Like you talked to my father before you shot him?" Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, older, harder, but unmistakably guilty. "He wouldn't listen," Vance said, stepping closer to the falls. "He didn't understand what this territory needs. Sometimes hard choices have to be made." "You murdered innocent people," she snapped. "Called it progress." Vance's voice rose above the roar of water. "Your father wanted to destroy everything we built. He was going to expose us, get good men killed. I gave him a chance to walk away. There's always a choice." Clara's words shook the cave walls. He chose what was right. You chose what was easy. Behind her, Talon's voice rasped through the dark. She has proof. Your words. Vance froze. What? She's not alone. Talon continued. Your men hear everything. For a moment, the sheriff's face went pale. The men outside had fallen silent, their torches wavering. They'd heard. Vance turned toward the shadows beyond the waterfall. You think they'll let any of us walk out of here alive? He said quietly. The ranchers, the ones who paid us, they'll bury this deeper than your father's grave. Not if it reaches the governor, Clara said. She pulled an envelope from inside her coat. My father sent copies, newspapers, marshals, politicians. He made sure the truth would outlive you. It was a lie, but Vance couldn't be sure. The realization broke something inside him. His pistol trembled in his hand. You don't know what you've done, he whispered. Maybe not, Clara said, but I know what you did. Outside, the men began to argue. Shouts echoed against the canyon walls, accusations, fear, confusion. Vance turned back toward her. They'll kill us all. You, me, him, none of this will matter. Then make it matter, she said, her voice hard. Tell the truth. You owe my father that much. Talon stirred beside her. He forgave you, he murmured to Vance. Said, tell them truth. Make them understand. Tears streaked down Vance's face, mingling with the rain. I can't undo it. No, Clara said softly. But you can stop lying. Gunfire erupted outside the cave. Vance spun toward the sound. His men were fighting each other, divided now by guilt and fear. He turned back to Clara, his eyes hollow. Get him to a doctor, he said. There's a settlement north, Dr. Chen. Tell him I sent you. Why are you helping us? She asked. Because your father was a better man than I'll ever be. No. He stepped through the waterfall, shouting orders to his men, drawing their fire away from the cave. Clara clutched the documents to her chest. We're leaving, she told Talon. He nodded weakly. You lead. They moved toward the waterfall as gunfire echoed through the canyon. Vance's voice rose one last time, defiant, doomed. Then came a final volley of shots. And silence. When Clara and Talon emerged, the storm had broken. The canyon was a graveyard of men and smoke. Vance's body lay near the river, his pistol still in hand, his eyes open toward the heavens he'd never reach. Clara said nothing. She just looked down at him, then turned away. There was still one promise left to keep. They reached the northern settlement by dawn, the world washed clean by rain but heavy with ghosts. Clara's clothes were stiff with dried blood. Her arms trembled from exhaustion. Talon leaned against her in the saddle, half conscious, his skin cold as the wind that swept through the mountain pass. The first light of morning revealed the cluster of wooden buildings below a trading post, a few homes, and a narrow sign that read Dr. Chen, Surgeon and Mercantile. She nearly fell from the horse when they stopped at the clinic door. Help! She called, her voice raw. He's been shot. The door burst open. A man in a linen coat, mid-40s, calm-eyed, took one look at Talon and barked orders in rapid precision. Within moments, the Apache was laid across a table, the doctor's hands already moving with methodical speed. Stay outside, Dr. Chen said without looking up. You don't want to see this. Clara obeyed because she had no strength left to argue. She sat on the steps, the tin box clutched against her chest like a holy relic, and watched the sunlight creep across the dirt road. She thought of her father's laughter, his rough hands teaching her to aim straight, the way he'd called truth a weapon sharper than any blade. Hours passed. When the door finally creaked open, Dr. Chen stepped out, wiping his hands on a towel. He'll live, he said. But it was close. Infection's the real danger now. Clara's knees nearly buckled. Relief came so sharp it hurt. Thank you, she whispered. He mentioned your father, the doctor added softly. Said you were finishing something he started. Clara nodded, her eyes wet. The truth. 3 weeks later, the territorial capital buzzed with scandal. Clara Nash stood before the governor's desk, her father's papers spread out like a storm of guilt. Beside her sat 2 federal marshals and 3 newspaper editors scribbling every word she spoke. She told them everything about the bounties, the ranchers who paid to have Apache families wiped from the land, the lies that had protected them, and about Sheriff Morgan Vance's final confession. When she finished, the room was silent. The governor, a stout man with gray hair and weary eyes, leaned forward. "Miss Nash," he said quietly, "what you've done will change this territory. There will be danger." "There's always danger," Clara replied. "But there's only one truth." Now, within days, newspapers across the frontier carried her story. Murdered lawmen. Ranchers pay for blood of innocents. Names were printed. Trials were ordered. The surviving members of Vance's gang were hunted down and brought to justice. The ranchers who funded the killings were arrested. Their fortunes seized. As for Vance, his body was buried in a pauper's grave outside the canyon. No marker, no prayers, just dust. The government awarded Clara compensation for the destroyed ranch, but she didn't rebuild it. Instead, she used every cent to start something her father would have believed in a school on the edge of the same plains where he'd died. It took 2 years of scraping and fighting prejudice to build it. When the doors finally opened, settlers' children and Apache children sat side by side at rough-hewn desks, learning to read and write beneath a roof Clara had hammered together with her own hands. Talon was there too, walking with a limp but strong again. He taught the Apache tongue, their songs and history, the stories his sister had once told him around the fire. Clara taught English, numbers, and the law, reminding them that knowledge could be its own kind of weapon. Sometimes, at dusk, when the sun burned red across the horizon, Clara would touch the medallion at her neck, the same one her father had worn the day he died, and whisper, "We did it, Pa. We told the truth." And for the first time in years, the wind across the plains didn't sound like mourning. It sounded like promise. A soft wind moved through the cemetery grass, carrying the scent of sage and rain. The stone that marked Elias Nash's grave stood clean and proud now. The old wooden cross replaced with marble paid for by the governor himself. The carving was simple. Elias Nash murdered while defending the innocent. Truth cannot be buried. Clara knelt in the dirt, her fingers tracing the letters her father never got to see. 5 years ago, she'd stood on this same ground, lost in silence. Now, the silence was different. It felt like peace. Behind her, laughter drifted from the open field where the schoolchildren were finishing their lessons. Their voices, Apache and settler alike, mingled in the golden light of evening. The sound filled the air like music her father would have loved. Talon approached quietly, walking with a cane but steady. The scars across his ribs had healed into a map of battles survived. In one hand he carried a small carved bird made of cedar, his sister's keepsake, and placed it gently beside the stone. "For both of them," he said. Clara smiled faintly. "For all of them," she replied. They stood together for a long time, watching the horizon where the sun dipped behind the distant hills. "Your father once said truth was heavier than lead," Talon murmured. "He was right. But you carried it further than he ever could." Clara reached up and touched the silver medallion at her throat, the same one that had set everything in motion. It glimmered softly in the sunset. "He taught me how," she said. The prairie wind picked up, swirling through the grass, through their hair, whispering against the stone. It no longer sounded like loss or ghosts. It sounded like the voice of the frontier itself, restless, alive, promising. Clara turned toward the schoolhouse where a lantern had just been lit in the window. The glow shone steady and warm against the darkening plains. "Come on," she said softly. "We've got a world to teach." Together they walked back toward the light, leaving the grave behind but not the truth it stood for. And as the last rays of the sun burned over the horizon, the land that had once taken everything from her finally gave something back. Peace.